Launched in 2022, and it is now a yesteryear, well, actually going on a 2-year-old iPhone Pro Max, with the 13 Pro Max still being one of the better used options out there. A lot of people tend to overlook the iPhone 14 Pro Max, but it's a way you can get Dynamic Island at a lesser price point. Now, I don't recommend everybody buy on eBay. You can also get this Apple refurbished, but I just go here to kind of gauge the market and show you the price points. But you can see in the US anyway, going for around $685, $767. I am aware in certain markets that these phones are still incredibly high, but I am talking about in the US market here in this video, and you'll see definitely around $600-700. So substantially less than buying an iPhone 15 Pro Max. And I don't care where you are, a 14 Pro Max should cost less than an iPhone 15 Pro Max, which will be obvious. Now, a quick spec refresh before we dive deeper into my review here in May of 2024 is that we do have ourselves a 6.7-inch Super Retina display here. This is an OLED panel, and that is of the XDR variety. So 120 hertz and adaptive refresh rate. It's an LTPO display, which means it can vary between 1 and 120 hertz. It also can save you battery life because of that. There are phones out there that don't have this but still have a 120 hertz, and they drain a lot of battery. They really do. Another spec that you want to keep in mind is that this phone does have a 48 megapixel triple camera. Now, the other two are not triple, but the main sensor is 48. The other two are not 48, but the main sensor is a 48 megapixel. I think I said the other two are not triple. I don't know what I was saying there. But if we go into the camera here, you have the ability to go times 15, and also you can back it out wide, which is quite nice. 6 gigabytes of RAM on board. So that was a nice upgrade to the 15 models. This only has 6 gigs, but you have this nice space black, which was kind of announced here on the iPad Pros that launch tomorrow. Be subscribed. I'm going to cover that one as well. 4323 milliamp hour battery here, so not the largest on the market, but still a pretty sizable battery that's housed within this stainless steel body here. So those are kind of the key specs that matter here. This is running iOS 17.5, which just got launched yesterday. Pretty decent update. Not tons and tons of features, but there's some new stuff. Overall, it still runs iOS. It's still very quick, and it has the A16 Bionic, which is found in the iPhone 15. So you're going to have a really, really good performance as well. So if I go to Geekbench 6, you'll see that this CPU is clocked in around 3.46 gigahertz and around 6 gigs of RAM. All right, so first thing I want to talk about is the battery life. Now, the 14 Pro was a phone that didn't have the best battery life out there, but the 14 Pro Max is still a solid option because it has a larger capacity. This phone never really made me be concerned about getting through the day, although it wasn't as good as, say, the 15 Pro Max or the 13 Pro Max. It's still solid, but some people were reporting that their capacities were draining very quickly on this one. I didn't really have that issue. As you can see, I'm still at 100, but do you have that issue? Let us know down below if you have one. This phone is always a 1-day phone. I do find the 15 Pro Max to be more of a 1.5 day, and the 13 Pro Max, when it first came out, that thing was like a 2-day phone. This one still pretty decent. It's the best of the 14 models for sure. Well, the 14 Plus probably slightly, but in terms of the Pro models, this was the best, obviously, and definitely better than the base 14. So this was a solid battery life on here. 1.5 years later on this phone, I wouldn't be too concerned. The next thing I want to talk about here is the cameras with the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Should you buy it here in May of 2024, you're still getting the same design. And if the dummies are true, the dummy prototypes we are seeing of the 16 models, it looks like Apple is going to retain this triple camera design once again and just increase the size of the phone to a 6.9. So yes, I do think design wise, you're safe to buy an iPhone 14 Pro Max without your phone looking dated in the camera department. We have ourselves the ultra wide, and it zooms between a 2 times, 3 times, and up to 15 times, which is plenty of zoom. And the results that turn out on here are pretty pro for sure. You do have the raw modes here and the ability to change between 16:9, square, and 4:3. You can do this on other phones as well, other iPhones. Cinematic mode, and in video you can go up to 4K 60 with the action mode brought to the 14 series. That was a big upgrade. Also, this does retain its macro mode. Now, the focusing distance changed on the iPhone, the 48 megapixel camera, because of the aperture. So some people were not a fan of how they had to double click a photo sometimes. If you like to just take a standard base photo, like a 12 megapixel shot, you're probably better off with a 13 Pro Max. But if you want a higher quality result, this one produces that. Also, you have panel mode and more. I do think it's time that Apple brings a dedicated Pro app camera just made by them for their Pro phones, like a Pro camera app exclusively useful are to be used on the Pro models. But overall, the camera has been excellent. I'm still incredibly happy with the 14 Pro Max's camera. And here's some of my results that I have from the iPhone 14 Pro Max. You'll see very, very good dynamic range. Look at the clouds in the background. The detail is there, especially in good lighting. It's an incredible camera. It feels like on all these Pro phones, but the 14 Pro Max was no exception. It feels like I have a point and shoot camera, like a decent, Sony level point and shoot camera. Again, with the clouds of dynamic range, the blues look pretty natural. This phone didn't really go over the top with saturation or anything like that. You can see right here on the bridge, the colors did not oversaturate. That's kind of how everything looked. That's my bicycle right there. You can just see it picks up the trees in the background. You can even see how it's got the cloud that's coming over. Let me go ahead and lower the brightness so you can see that. You can see how it's picking up the cloud and the building behind the cloud. So, it picks up the details. This is no chump in the camera department. In the area of performance, we've actually haven't done a speed test on this phone in quite a while. So maybe I'll bring a new one back to do an updated test. But when I pick up my 14 Pro Max, I feel like I'm using my 15 Pro Max. I don't feel like there's any difference, and there shouldn't be a massive one because Apple is using the same CPU in the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus. So the 14 Pro Max is an easy recommendation for performance. It's still incredibly strong. These chips are overpowered. They were overpowered when they came out, and they're still overpowered to this day for just general usage. They're not overpowered though. If you love to play games, Apple Arcade, you like to do things that really push the CPU. Like I like great CPU performance for things like GTA or COD, maybe Genshin Impact, Real Racing. Some of these games that really push it a little bit more, I would prefer having a Max. But there's not really anything taking advantage of the performance in terms of, the basic apps. So you definitely have to do some video rendering here, edit out some videos, do a bunch of stuff at once to really push the CPU. And if you're not, you're going to have a pretty decent performance all day long. And if you're thinking about how long will it last if I bought it now, well, considering the 15 just came out, I think you got a good 4 years or so before any lag starts to really occur on this phone. One thing is, will the RAM support the AI is going to be a question, because AI definitely uses up a lot of RAM. But I do think, knowing Apple, they're going to find a way to make this very well supported on their older phones. So I do think you'll be safe to use some of the AI features for sure on a 14 Pro Max. Seeing as Samsung has been bringing it to their S line of older phones, I don't see it being any different here. You can also run ChatGPT and stuff like that, and other Claude and other OpenAI sources. You can run AI apps already on this phone just fine, but I'm talking about the ones Apple's going to launch with iOS 18. You should be fine for most of them here as well. All right, so what I really like about the display is that obviously it's a large display. It has pretty thin bezels. That's quite nice as well. And the phone itself has a really bright display, especially outdoors. Here, I'm already in a bright, controlled environment, but if I go outside, it has a really bright display. It's also pretty sharp. It's always been sharper on the larger iPhones, although not as sharp as like a Pixel device, like a Pixel Pro has sharper text, as does a Samsung. Some Samsung devices, like the Ultra lines, have sharper pixels per inch. It's still good enough here. It's like well over 450, so it's solid. Getting a little focus right there, out of focus right there, but the overall display experience can be hindered a little bit by the dynamic island if you watch a lot of content in landscape mode. That's the only con I found with this really, is watching content landscape mode. Dynamic island hinders it, but dynamic island is used in a lot more apps today than it was when this first came out. However, it just still feels like an afterthought. I don't really feel like it feels like it's a main focus of this phone. It just feels like it's there and it gets used sometimes, but it's not like a main thing you interact with all the time. So my dream is still a full screen, all screen iPhone, but this display has been pretty darn good. And if you want to buy it now, you're getting really good brightness, really nice options for eye comfort, and overall just a really solid OLED panel. Build quality is an area I would definitely strongly consider the iPhone 14 Pro Max. This one actually is more of a tank than the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Drop tests have proven it. The stainless steel, while adding heft to the phone, which is not always the most practical if you like a lighter body, did provide a structure that is super solid. The titanium is lighter weight, and arguably for some it could be more strong of a metal, but the structure on the iPhone 14 Pro Max feels like an absolute tank on the sides. Like, you could drop this thing and that stainless steel can take a beating on this phone. So I don't recommend you drop it, but if you want to use this phone without a case, just a screen protector on the front, you'll probably be pretty good even with a few drops on some harder surfaces. I'm not saying go drop it on purpose, and I'm not assuming that most people are going to use this without a case, but I will say build quality is tough on this phone. I don't like how the painted versions of this phone, the lightning area gets kind of messed up with when you stick it in and out of there, the paint kind of comes off. And the space black, if you're not careful, this paint will just kind of start rubbing off on certain corners and it'll look a little beat up. So if you want to keep it clean and pristine, you're going to want a case. In terms of design, its overall looks, we brushed on that a little bit earlier, but like I say, it's got the space black of the iPad Pro still, and it has the same overall general look as the newer iPhones. If I put this in the thumbnail like this, most people would, they see this, they'll know. But if they just see this, is that the 15 Pro Max again? They're not going to really know. So definitely, this is definitely still up to date, at least in Apple standards when it comes to design. Again, I really think they should change this camera look. It's been around for a while now. And the dynamic island, I'm still waiting for an all screen, but the UDC cameras I don't think are ready for prime time, at least according to Apple's high quality standards. This is still looking up to date right now, design wise. Okay, so I want to go through a list of cons and then some pros, and then I'll wrap this thing up here for this May 2024 review. Con number 1, Lightning port. Lightning port is super outdated. All Apple products are going USB-C, and once they get the 14s out of the line, we're going to be all USB-C. So this is the future. Just like they transitioned to the M3 silicon, all Apple products are going to go USB-C, and eventually the whole lineup is going to go that way. So that's a con to me, as that cable just creates 2 cables you have to use instead of 1 across your ecosystem. Battery life is the second one. While I said it's pretty good, it's acceptable, you can get better with the 14 Plus, 15 Plus, or 15 Pro Max, even maybe 13 Pro Max if that battery health is in good condition, should you buy it used. So this is kind of on battery. It's good enough, but it's not the best Max phone we've seen before. Next con is the weight. The phone feels heavy and bulky compared to, say, a 15 model phone. A 15 Plus, 15, even a 14 Plus is much lighter than this phone. So this phone just feels kind of hefty. Some people love that, and if you love that, this is your phone. But if you don't, that's a con. The next con is weak zoom length for the serious photographers out there. While I said earlier in the camera, it's decent. I didn't say it was amazing. So you can go 3 times, which is okay. That's usable. But 15 times zoom, if you're a serious photographer with you do a lot of wildlife photography, you want to zoom in on architecture, buildings, anything far, you're on vacation, you need that reach. This phone is weak there. 15 times is solid, but it's not going to get the job done if you want to go like 30, 50. You're going to need something like a Samsung phone or a 15 Pro Max that has a 25X. Big time pros now. Super smooth LTPO ProMotion display. Huge upgrade here over something like a 14 Plus or even a 15 Plus. For me, I probably would pick this over a 15 Plus if it was my choice between those two, just because of this alone. And it feels more premium. So I'm probably going with this over a 15 Plus all day of the week. It's just a really, really nice display experience with ProMotion. Pro number 2. While I said it's hefty and chunky compared to some of the other lighter iPhones, this thing is a premium high quality feel, man. Space black, a black painted edge. I think this one looks more premium than my natural titanium 15 Pro Max maybe. It's just got a classy, high quality look. Yeah, it gets a little bit greasy here. You got to wipe it off, but it just looks like $1,000,000, man. This thing looks premium, so that's definitely a pro. Pro number 3 is it continues to retain good resale value. It's kind of insane. You can still get around $800 for a phone like this, $700 in some cases, maybe on the low end $650 if you wrecked it. You got crappy battery capacity, or a low storage model. That could, but the pro is that you still get really good resale value on this phone. Retains its value pretty well still. Pro number 4 is the dynamic island. This was the first Max phone to launch with this. Now the 15 Pro Max has it as well. And while I said earlier, it doesn't feel like, it feels kind of like an afterthought, like it's not the main thing experience on this phone. More developers are getting on board, and I'm seeing it be used more here. Plus, you don't have to buy a brand new iPhone to get a dynamic island. Now you can go with a yesteryear iPhone 14 Pro Max. And 5, the excellent performance. This phone performs just like a brand new 15 model at a reduced cost over most of the new 15 models. So this is a really good pickup here used right now. And I know the 13 Pro Max is the king of like used iPhone seemingly to a lot of people, but there's a lot of upgrades over the 13 Pro Max on this phone. And now this one is becoming more reachable as newer products come out and as the iPhone 15 models age and as we get closer to the 16s. So the 14 Pro Max seeming like a solid option right now. Let me know if you agree with my May 2024 assessment of the iPhone 14 Pro Max. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns about this phone, you're planning on buying one, you need to know more, or you have a question about should you buy this or another iPhone and you're on the fence, drop them in the comments, because we have a community over here. We'll definitely help you out, share with you their experiences, and I'll try to get back to you as well. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'll catch you all in the next episode. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.